I want you to picture like an uneven scale in your mind, just a classic balancing scale.
Right, like an old brass one.
Yeah, exactly. And on the left side, picture a pile of perfectly roasted, aromatic coffee beans.
Okay, I'm with you.
And on the right side, a pool of slick, black crude oil. But the background here isn't a kitchen, and it's not some industrial refinery.
No, it's a lot darker than that.
Right. It's a blurred, chaotic battlefield. You can see smoke in the air, you hear sirens. It's this really unsettling juxtaposition.
It is, but it completely perfectly encapsulates this deeply counterintuitive dynamic in global economics.
Because we usually operate under this huge assumption, right? We think wealth brings peace.
Oh, absolutely. The standard thinking is that poverty drives war and a booming economy is the cure.
Like, if a town gets rich, everyone's happy. But we're doing a deep dive today that completely upends that. What if I told you the exact same economic boom that builds, like, schools in one town is the direct cause of a bloody massacre in the next town over?
It is a total slap in the face to our basic intuition. It forces us to completely reevaluate how conflict actually works.
The price of the coffee you are literally drinking right now, or the gas you just put in your car, dictates the life and death of thousands of people across the globe.
It really does. It's not abstract theory. We're talking about a stock ticker literally predicting where the next civil war will ignite.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a landmark paradigm-shifting study from 2013, published in the Review of Economic Studies.
Yeah, by economists Oeindrila Dube and Juan Vargas. This is a milestone in conflict economics.
And what's so wild here is that this isn't about ideology, right? It's not about ancient religious hatreds or Marxist manifestos.
Not at all. I mean, those elements are the window dressing, but underneath it's a brutal, cold-blooded mathematical law of human behavior.
And to prove this, they built this incredible micro-laboratory out of Colombia.
Right, and the scale of the data they used is it's staggering. We're talking over 950 municipalities, spanning 18 years. From 1988 to 2005, they tracked more than 21,000 specific acts of violence.
Wait, 21,000? That's not just a rough guess at a country level.
No, it's a microscopic slice of war. They mapped exactly when a clash happened, down to the specific town and day.
Okay, so before we get into the actual commodities, let's unpack the cast of characters here, because Colombia in the 90s is complex.
Very. You essentially have three main armed groups outside the regular state military. First, the left-wing guerrillas.
So that's the FARC and the ELN, right?
Exactly. Originating in the 60s, technically fighting for agrarian reform, Marxist-Leninist ideology.
And on the other side,
The right-wing paramilitaries, mainly the AUC, they started as private security for wealthy landowners to fight off the guerrillas.
but they turned into something much darker.
Oh, incredibly brutal, mostly using targeted massacres of civilians to control territory.
Right. And we watch movies and think these groups fight purely because of those ideologies. But this data suggests they act more like rival corporations looking at a balance sheet.
That is the perfect way to look at it. It's a calculated business of violence.
So let's look at the two pillars of their economy, because this is where the mind-blowing part starts. You have coffee and you have oil.
And the crucial distinction here isn't agriculture versus energy, it's how they are produced.
Because coffee is incredibly labor-intensive.
Exactly. You can't use massive machines on steep Colombian mountain slopes. You need thousands of people handpicking beans.
So a coffee economy relies on paying wages to a huge rural workforce.
Right. But oil is the exact opposite. It's capital intensive.
Meaning you just need heavy machinery and a few engineers, not a whole town of workers.
Precisely. It doesn't hire the locals. What it does do is generate massive tax revenues, or what economists call rents, for the local government.
Okay, so one pays wages to the people, the other pays taxes to the government.
Keep that difference in mind, because it dictates who gets killed when prices change.
So let's go to the late 90s. Between 1997 and 2003, the international coffee market just completely collapses.
A total free fall. Prices plunged by 68%.
And I want to make sure we're clear. This wasn't Colombia's fault. This wasn't some local political crisis.
No, it was entirely outside forces. A massive frost wiped out crops in Brazil, so they replanted more efficiently.
And Vietnam flooded the market with cheap beans.
Exactly. So the global price drops to nothing. And the local Colombian coffee towns are devastated.
The wallets empty out. But the data shows it wasn't just poverty.
It was a bloodbath. In those coffee-dependent municipalities, guerrilla attacks went up 18%. Paramilitary attacks went up 31%. Overall, human casualties increased by 14%.
Which translates to what, like 1,000 extra dead people?
Roughly 1,000 extra fatalities, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because of a frost in Brazil.
That is, I mean, that's just chilling. But why? Why does being poor make a farmer pick up an AK-47?
It comes down to something called opportunity cost. Let's break it down without the academic jargon.
Please do.
When coffee prices are high, farms pay a decent wage. You have a job. The cost of giving up that job to join a jungle militia is too high.
Right. You have a life, you have a paycheck, you're not going to risk getting shot.
But when prices drop 68%, farms go bankrupt. The hiring stops. Wages hit rock bottom.
It's like a massive factory shutting down in a one-factory town.
Exactly. And suddenly the only hiring managers left in town are the warlords.
Wow.
If the AUC militia pays a standard wage, plus they give you food and clothes, your opportunity cost drops to zero.
You literally can't afford not to join the war.
And the household survey data perfectly matches this. Wages and hours were plummeted right as the violence spiked in those exact towns.
So, okay, poverty causes war because desperate people need a paycheck. That makes intuitive sense to us.
It does.
Yeah.
But here is where the data gets completely wild. Let's look at oil.
Right, the second commodity. From 1998 to 2005, international oil prices skyrocketed, like a 137% increase.
A massive, historic boom.
And here's where it gets really interesting. You'd think, okay, great, 137% boom is a gift from the heavens.
The town gets rich, violence drops.
Right.
Right.
Everyone's happy. But that's not what happened.
Not even close. In the oil-producing municipalities, this massive influx of wealth led to a 14% increase in paramilitary attacks.
Wait, really? The boom was a death warrant?
Literally a death warrant. Getting richer made them bleed more.
Okay, my brain is burning a little bit. Why does a town getting rich cause a massacre?
It's called the rapacity effect. The logic of greed. Remember how oil is produced.
Right. Capital intensive, few workers, heavy machinery.
So that 137% price boom doesn't mean higher wages for the average guy on the street.
He's still unemployed.
Exactly. Instead, the wealth flows straight into the local municipal government's coffers as royalty taxes.
Ah, I see. So the treasury just swells up.
It balloons. And the armed groups, specifically the right-wing paramilitaries here, they look at this and they don't see unemployed workers to recruit.
They see a giant glowing treasure chest.
Exactly. The local government becomes a target. The militias act as predators. They aren't fighting for ideology. They're essentially conducting a violent bank robbery.
So when the town was poor, they fought to survive. But when the town got rich, the monsters just came out of the woods to raid the vault.
That's precisely what happened.
Man.
And they did it through political kidnappings.
Kidnappings!
Yes, the data tracks it perfectly. Kidnappings of mayors and local officials spiked directly in tandem with the oil price.
To extort the town's budget.
To extort the budget, to force them to award fake public works contracts to front companies.
Good Lord.
And they went straight for the oil, too. The paper details how there were so many illegal taps drilled into the main pipeline by these armed groups.
Stealing the raw crude.
Yeah, stealing it. There were so many holes in the pipe that locals literally called it the flute.
The flute! That is a visceral detail.
In the early 2000s alone, $10 million worth of crude just vanished, siphoned right out of the pipe to fund the paramilitaries.
Okay, so we have two completely opposite triggers for violence. Coffee crashes, war. Oil booms, war. But how do we know this isn't just, a coincidence?
Well, you have to play devil's advocate.
Right, because anyone listening is screaming right now, wait a minute, it's Colombia in the 90s.
The cocaine assumption.
Exactly. When coffee failed, didn't the farmers just start growing coke for cocaine? And all this violence is just drug cartels fighting over new turf.
It is the most logical assumption you could make, but the researchers absolutely dismantled it.
How? How do you prove it wasn't drugs?
With satellite data from space. They use UN data that tracks coca cultivation from orbit.
Oh,
The
wow.
satellites can tell the difference between a coffee plant canopy and a coca plant canopy.
That is wild.
And the data showed that when coffee prices fell, coca cultivation did not significantly increase in those specific coffee areas.
Really? So they didn't just switch crops?
No, but Dube and Vargas went even further.
Oh.
They took their massive data set and mathematically removed every single municipality that grew even 1 hectare of coca.
Just wipe them off the map.
Exactly. They ran the numbers again on a totally legal, drug-free landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And the coffee violence link remained perfectly intact.
So even with zero cocaine involved, the price of coffee dictated the violence. That is bulletproof.
It really is.
But what about the oil side? There's another assumption there, the hired muscle theory.
Right, the idea that maybe the local politicians got so rich from oil that they just hired the right-wing paramilitaries as a private security force to protect the pipelines.
Yeah, like, hey, we're rich now, let's hire some guards. So the violence is just the guards fighting off the guerrillas.
Again, very logical, but totally wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The data debunks it with two really chilling facts.
Okay, hit me.
First, if they were hired for protection, direct clashes might go up, but massacres of civilians should go down, right?
Right, security guards protect the town.
But the data shows that paramilitary massacres specifically spiked in the oil towns.
Oh, God.
You do not pay a private security firm to slaughter the townspeople. It was a terror tactic to subjugate the population and steal the money.
That is horrific.
And second, they checked the voting records. There was a huge scandal where some local politicians were secretly allied with the paramilitaries.
Parapolitics scandal.
Exactly. If the paramilitaries were invited in, you'd expect the violence to only happen in towns with those pro-paramilitary mayors.
Because they opened the door for them.
But the violence spiked uniformly across all oil towns, regardless of who the mayor was.
Yeah.
It wasn't an invited security force. It was a hostile takeover.
Man, so it's not drugs and it's not hired security. It really is just the invisible hand of the market causing massacres.
It's an absolute mathematical tragedy.
Which makes you wonder, is this just a quirk of coffee and oil? Or is this a universal law?
The researchers asked the exact same question. So they expanded their laboratory. They looked at a whole basket of goods.
What else did they test?
They looked at coal and gold. Both are capital-intensive resources, just like oil.
So they generate massive rents for the government.
Exactly. And the pattern held. A rise in the price of coal or gold caused a direct spike in violence.
The rapacity effect strikes again.
And then they tested sugar, bananas, tobacco, and palm.
All labor-intensive, like coffee.
Right. And sure enough, a drop in their price caused a spike in violence because of the opportunity cost effect.
That is terrifyingly consistent. But wait, I noticed something asymmetric in the data you mentioned earlier.
What's that?
You said when the coffee market crashed, both the guerrillas and the paramilitaries increased their attacks.
Yes.
But when the oil market boomed, only the right-wing paramilitaries increased their attacks. Why wouldn't the left-wing guerrillas want to steal the oil money too?
That is a fascinating nuance. It comes down to the geography of the predators. Yes. Oil is highly concentrated in very specific geographical pockets in Colombia, primarily in regions like Magdalena Medio and Córdoba.
Okay.
Now, if you trace the history of the AUC paramilitaries, those exact regions are where they originated back in the 80s.
Ah, so they were already there.
Exactly. They started as anti-extortion vigilantes in the oil patches. By the time the massive oil boom hit in the late 90s, they had already spent a decade violently purging the left-wing guerrillas from those areas.
So they had a total monopoly on the oil real estate. The guerrillas couldn't physically get to the vault.
Right. But coffee has grown across 536 municipalities. It's everywhere.
More than half the country.
So when the agricultural labor market collapsed, both left-wing and right-wing groups had physical access to thousands of desperate, unemployed farmers in their respective territories.
It's literally real estate. The paramilitaries had the penthouse suite near the oil vault, while everyone else was fighting block by block in the agricultural suburbs.
That's a grim but accurate way to picture it.
Okay, so knowing this absolute unbending rule of economics, how do we stop it? Because we can't just ban coffee and oil.
No, but understanding the mechanics allows us to design actual policy solutions. And they are completely different depending on the commodity.
Okay, let's start with the coffee farms. How do you stop a rebellion in an agricultural hub without just sending in more troops?
You build a price floor.
A price floor, like a subsidy.
Exactly. If the government or an international body guarantees a minimum purchase price for labor-intensive crops, they're actively managing the opportunity cost.
So even if the global market crashes because of Vietnam, the local farmer still gets his base pay.
Right. The legal wage doesn't drop to zero, so the cost of going to war remains too high.
That's amazing. If you want to disarm a rebel, don't buy a bullet. Just give a coffee farmer an insurance policy.
It is arguably far cheaper and more effective than deploying military battalions.
But what about the oil and gold problem? That seems harder. The money is just sitting there.
It is much harder. And it highlights a really tragic irony in Colombia's history regarding decentralization.
Decentralization, like
Yeah.
giving power to local governments.
Yes. In 1991, Colombia passed a new constitution that put more royalty money directly into the hands of local mayors.
Which sounds like a great democratic idea, right?
Yeah.
Give the money back to the local people.
It sounds wonderful on paper, but by dumping millions of dollars into small, rural municipal accounts that had no oversight and no police protection.
They just created an all-you-can-eat buffet for the paramilitaries.
Exactly. They turned the mayors into high-value targets.
Oh, man. So what's the solution?
Massive, transparent oversight. The researchers conclude that you absolutely cannot leave giant piles of resource rent unguarded in weak institutional areas.
You have to lock the ATM.
You have to lock it down. Every dollar of royalty money has to be publicly tracked, audited, and secured before it ever reaches a vulnerable local official.
Otherwise, a natural resource isn't a blessing, it's just a curse.
A curse that fuels predatory violence.
This has been such a journey. We started by looking at a scale with coffee beans and crude oil, and we've seen how the exact same upward tick on a financial chart can mean a thriving economy in a labor market, but an absolute bloodbath in a resource market.
It all comes down to the design of the commodity. Whether it requires human sweat or heavy machinery, dictates the violent fate of the people living on top of it.
It really does. And I want to address you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. Because we've been talking about Colombia in the 1990s. But think about the world today.
Right. It's highly relevant.
We are living in an era of massive supply chain disruptions, wild swings in global food prices, and a frantic, high-stakes race for rare earth minerals.
Lithium, cobalt.
Exactly. The stuff we need to build our smartphones and electric cars. These are highly capital-intensive resources being discovered in remote, developing regions with weak institutions.
We are essentially setting the stage for the exact same macroeconomic shocks.
So the next time you see a news headline about the price of a barrel of crude oil spiking or a bad frost ruining a crop harvest somewhere, don't just think about what it will cost you at the grocery store or the gas pump.
Look deeper at the math.
Ask yourself, whose wages just dropped to zero? Whose local government just became a glowing target for a militia? Because somewhere on the other side of the planet, that invisible price fluctuation just handed a teenager a rifle.